And maybe it's just that I haven't made the new shop a home yet. I haven't spent a lot of time there. I haven't set it up. I haven't.
You don't have a coffee maker.
You got tunes?
Well, that's it.
You got
I don't
tunes?
have to. All I've done is move some machinery.
Yeah,
so
tunes
far.
and a coffee maker and a place to sit when you're listening to tunes and having coffee.
Yeah.
And then it's home.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. You're listening to Justin Fink. I'm joined today by Brian Pontalillo.
Hello.
Hello, and Rob Yeagan.
Hello.
And Jeff.
Hello.
You know, Jeff, this time, so Jeff's gotten into his habit of, after we're done recording the show, he asks us a question about something. Like,
Oh, yeah, he does do that.
so if you have any questions today, Jeff, just go ahead and join in, you know? If whatever we're talking about raises a question for you that you feel would add value to the show, don't hesitate. If you don't
New
feel like it would
segment.
add value, don't talk.
Questions from Jeff.
Yeah. Cues
Sometimes-
from Jay.
Sometimes Jeff has the answers.
I know, and he doesn't tell us till after the show.
Yeah.
That's even worse.
That's the worst.
7.
All right, so before we get started with the show, reminder that our email address is fhbpodcast@taunton.com, taunton.com. That's where you send us questions and topics for discussion. If you are a builder or a remodeler or a homeowner and you think that you have an interesting thing that you'd like to share, please share it. If you are out in the field and you and your crew argue about the best way to do something, ask us. Maybe we can talk about it on the air. And if you are standing in the aisle of a home center and you don't know which of the 7 products that all look similar to you to choose, ask us that too. We love that kind of stuff.
It's all good stuff.
It's all good. That's fhbpodcast@taunton.com. No topic too small, although there are topics too complicated.
Plenty of those, for sure.
If you aren't already watching a video version of this show on our website, then let me tell you where to go. FineHomebuilding.com/podcast. That's also where you're going to see Mike Moran Alterio's beautiful show note, show notes write-up.
Yeah.
Mike does a great job with that, so check it out. And you can also find us on YouTube. If you don't know the URL for that, ask somebody.
There's a new
Google it.
podcast app. Have you guys gotten that on your phone? I don't know how I got it. It appeared on my
Awesome.
phone.
This is already off to a great start.
What is it like, Brian?
This is just hilarious. Go ahead.
So I don't know what it is, but now I have the old podcast app on my phone.
The Apple
original
Podcast
one, the
app?
Apple Podcast
Okay.
app. I now have a new one that is an app for podcasts.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where it came from. It's on my
Okay.
phone. It's on the second page of my phone.
Okay, you sure it wasn't there all the time?
I'm pretty sure.
You just never
Yeah.
swiped to the second page before?
What does it look like?
Here's the thing. It's gotten me listening to some podcasts.
Why?
I don't know because I saw it and I was like, what is this? I went in there and I ended up listening to some podcasts.
Like, what is it?
What is it?
Okay.
So why do you?
I'll show it to you guys later.
What color
that
is the
one?
icon?
Let me see. No,
Okay.
that's the Ridge. It's new. I think-
Rage is not a word.
I wonder if Amy maybe
I kinda like it,
downloaded
though.
it. Sometimes I get her purchases or her apps on my phone because we share an iTunes account.
Oh.
I
That's
wonder if
probably
maybe
what
she
happened.
downloaded it and ended up on my phone. But anyway, we should get on there.
That's
my point. Is we should get on there.
Are we not on there already?
I didn't look.
This has been great,
I
Brian.
told you. Thanks. Full circle. It was going exactly where I thought it was going to go.
Yep.
Absolutely nowhere.
I will say that months ago when Apple updated the podcast app, it is so much worse. I think. Does anybody else feel the same way? I feel like it's way, way worse. It's harder to find the shows that you want to watch. It's harder to navigate them.
Yeah, I guess.
It's a pain. It stinks. It was the worst.
All right, it's the worst.
Oh,
And it's been months. So
Certified.
it's not just like, well, you're not used to it yet. You
Certified
fear
the worst.
change.
Listen
I've
up, Tim
adapted to
Cook.
it, and I don't like it.
Yeah, listen. Write me an email.
Wish I could revert. Wish you had the option
tweet at 'em.
to go back to the previous version.
This is similar to all those readers who are still sending us letters to bring back great moments.
Yes.
I wonder how many people that are listening to this show know of great moments.
Great moments in building history was
And if
the
you do,
last page
let
of
us
the
know your
magazine.
favorite one is.
Great
There's people
moment
who've got some.
I wrote a
some
great
favorites.
moment one time.
You
It
got
might be the only nice thing I've ever written.
You got published?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It was good.
Miller
That was
let-
pretty funny.
Who let that one squeak by?
Well, it's Slim Pickens.
Hey, you seem to be gearing up for your shop.
Yes, I'm moving.
What's going on over there?
I'm moving out of my garage shop and into a bigger shop space.
So now that the garage shop is finally done,
I know it's. I gotta tell you, and there's it's. Well, I mean, I think I mentioned this on the show last time or the time before that as soon as I finished my garage, I was standing outside of it and I went, "Damn it! I wish I made this thing. I wish I didn't." It was a spiraling thing where it needed a new roof. It had a hip roof, single story hip roof, and I was like, I want to make this thing a gabled roof with a 1.5 story or 2 story, so it matches the look of the house. I get more room. There's more room interior, and more room for windows and things
you
too
have a
on the
loft
outside.
up there.
But then I was like, I can't afford to do it. I just couldn't. I didn't have nearly enough money to really do it right. So when the roof started leaking, I went, well, I got to suck it up, and I just got to tear off this roof and replace the roofing. So I did that, and then I was like, damn it, I still hate this roof. But now it's got a new roof on it, so I might as well insulate it because I'm sucking wind in the winter. Insulated it. And then I went, well, I got a new roof and insulation, so I might as well just deal with this shop now. So I put up drywall.
You did a lot of work.
Redesigned the interior so it was
Added a little bump out in the back for
added a
wood
bump out in the
storage.
back for wood storage, and then promptly put on the last coat of paint and said, "I'm moving out." No, because I want to get some new machinery. I'm kind of opening. I'm kind of rehanging my shingle a little bit in the world of moonlighting work, whereas I used to do all remodeling and some trim carpentry and that kind of stuff. I don't really want to do that anymore. So I'm trying to just take on projects here and there, doing cabinetry and built-ins and architectural woodwork and that kind of stuff. I mean, if somebody came to me and wanted a furniture piece, I would say sure, but those are few and far between. So my goal at this point is simply just to make the shop lease pay for itself. Like, I'm not looking to have this be a huge empire or anything. But I found a cool kind of an old mill shop space. It was an old manufacturing facility from the 1800s.
A lot of
on
those
the river.
around here in Connecticut.
And it's like 1,000 square feet, so it's not huge, but it's like twice as big as my garage. Huge, like really high ceilings, which I never had, so it feels like a miracle to have them now. It's got a loading dock, so
Nice.
that kind of stuff is easier. And I'm going to pick up a new jointer tomorrow.
You are?
Yeah, a new old one.
From the
buying
woodworking shop?
No, I'm getting it from Craigslist.
Really?
Yep.
So what are you getting?
Dog, don't make me pronounce the name.
Is it big?
It's French.
Is it a beast?
It's an 8-inch jointer, and it's a beast, yeah.
Right.
It's Poitras or Poitras, or I don't know. It's Poitras. And so anybody who also reads Fine Woodworking knows Roland Johnson. He's like their machine tool guru expert.
Right. Restoring stuff and tuning stuff.
Also like the nicest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
So when I saw this thing on Craigslist, and I never heard of the brand, but I had looked it up, and what little I could find online, people were talking very highly of this brand, but I didn't know like what it's worth. I can't find any, the manuals in French. So I come to find out it's a Canadian company. And so I emailed Raleigh about it, and I said, just what are your thoughts on this? Is this price good and whatnot? And he was like, yeah, this is a super solid brand. This is a good find, and that price is good. If you swap out the cutter head for a Shelix cutter head, which I'll go into in a second,
Okay.
he's like, you'll have a great lifetime jointer. And so I'm going to go pick it up tomorrow.
Do you know how
which
old
I'm
it is?
excited about.
Did he say how old it was?
I don't have the serial number, but I'll look it up once I have that. My guess is, I don't know, 40s or 50s or something.
Awesome.
It might be later than that. It might be 60s or 70s. I don't know.
Are
But
you
it's-
going to break the suspension on your truck, getting it over to the shop?
Well, this guy's got a forklift, so
yes.
he's gonna put it in.
So yes.
And then I've loaded that truck up with way worse than this. That thing's a beast.
You have a forklift at the shop, right?
I can use one if I need it. The people next door have a forklift and offered it to me. So yeah, there's another perk.
Are there other woodworkers in the area?
No.
Okay, so
No.
there's only one.
No, it's just like some office spaces and stuff like that. But so anyway, so I'm not going to swap this cutter head, but so if anybody knows either a thickness planer or a jointer, it has kind of straight knives that when they spin, they're spinning parallel to the opening in the table, right? or perpendicular to the travel of the board. I guess you could say that.
Helix, you said?
Helix is a brand, a bird
So
Helix.
is it a helical cutting head?
Helical cutter head, that's the word I'm looking for. It just basically puts them on a spiral. And you have, instead of those long knives, you have these little individual square knives.
Yeah.
And so if one gets dinged, and they're carbide, by the way, and if one gets dinged, you can just loosen that nut or loosen that little fastener, spin it, and retighten it, and now you have a fresh cutting edge on that one spot without having to touch everything else. So it's like you invest in it, it sucks for like $400 or $500. I think it was for this jointer if I want to get it. You replace that whole thing, and then your life is a lot better. You know, you get better cuts, it lasts longer, it's easier to fix when you start getting nicks. So, I mean, at some
It's a
point,
lot quieter too.
yeah, I haven't actually heard it, but that's what I have heard from everyone else too, which is good for me because I don't want to get kicked out for making too much noise.
Do they know that you're...
Yeah, I went over it with them.
Really?
I was like, it's gonna be loud. And they're like, how loud? I'm like, I don't know. What do you I mean loud? Like, what do you want me to say? It's gonna be as loud as woodworking tools.
Oh, this is going to be great.
Yeah. So I'll probably get kicked out.
Very cool.
Is there such thing as a jointer that feeds the boards through?
Like a thickness planer does? Like with rollers?
Yeah, last time
and...
I was using the jointer and planer down at the shop, I was curious why, the thickness planers do that, but jointers
Don't.
don't. You have to feed the boards
I think
through.
you could put a power feed on it, which is essentially, it looks like roller skate or rollerblade wheels on like a little device that you pull down over a board. They use them for shapers and routers and whatever else. And it just, the wheels spin at whatever speed you set it at, and it pushes down and it moves the board forward. The idea there is, you don't have to muscle everything as much. You could be putting it on and then grabbing the next board while it's going through, whatever.
Right.
Also, it's safer because your hands are away, and because you can control the speed, you can avoid halting in the middle of a cut and leaving a little change in the shape of the pattern of cut or burning that you get sometimes with words like cherry and that kind of stuff. But I haven't ever seen it, but I'm sure it's a thing.
Yeah.
That's just because I'm not spending time in high end like
I've never seen
industrial
it either.
shops. But
Question number 2.
yes.
It seems like jointers, they seem like such a potentially dangerous tool, yet I rarely have heard of accidents on the jointer.
I think Garrett Hack, who's a woodworking author, lost his tip of his finger on one.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems incredibly
It
dangerous.
seems
Yeah.
remarkably dangerous, and yet but it's not something I hear often
You
about,
need those
about accidents on.
push pads and
Well,
push sticks and stuff.
And it takes a little bit of effort to be pushing a wide board, particularly a wide board.
what makes it exceptionally dangerous to you?
Well, that's...
And I don't mean that like in a sarcastic way.
No, it's a pretty large exposed blade if something goes wrong.
Right.
You
But
know?
but so is a bandsaw.
Sure.
And you don't
It
hear
doesn't
much
seem
about
to-
that either.
No,
The
bandsaw,
reason-
I feel like, and this is all just experiential, but on the bandsaw, I feel like I have, and on a scroll saw too, I feel like I have so much control. Like
Yeah.
it takes very little effort to push something through the bandsaw compared to, and I think that's where why I always wonder about it, because it takes a lot of effort. You really gotta it takes effort and strength to be pushing your board through the.
Well, especially when you're taking an inch off at a time, Brian.
Well,
the jointer.
so there's a couple of things that work there. One, I think every tool is equally dangerous if you get complacent. Like if you are making 8,000 cuts on a bandsaw and you start to zone out and you
Right.
cross your thumb, you're gonna nick it. Same
Right.
thing if you're doing that on the table saw or the jointer. I think the reason you hear so much beyond that about the table saw is because it's so prone to kickback, and no other
Yeah, it's
tools
the
are prone to
forces
that
of the-
kickback.
Yeah.
And it's used a lot.
It is,
It's
but
in constant use where your jointer's not in.
But it is like the
but
the
that's
function
when
and the
people
mechanics
lose
of the
fingers.
saw.
Yeah.
Is different than all that energy is going down on a bandsaw. It's not coming
Yes.
back at you.
Yeah, it would be
Right.
virtually impossible to have kickback on a bandsaw.
Yeah.
You will sometimes, in certain cuts, get it caught and it will slam down onto the table
Yeah.
if it's like a bowed piece or whatever. But the nature of the way the table saw kicks back and drags your hand into it. That's where it gets gnarly. But I could see you would get it on the jointer, like with a thin piece that exploded or something, or just having your fingers wrapped around one end without realizing as you're
Yeah,
pushing
you're
it just
dragging
gets
it through.
caught. But
Well, that's why you have those
you're not
pads, right?
You're not getting your finger back though. Like the table saw, you might reattach it, and the jointer, your finger's gone.
Yeah.
like it's not It's
It's a
It's
pink
not-
cloud.
yeah, it's pink mist. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
brutal, Jeff.
Yeah.
Pink cloud.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for that visual. Appreciate
But
that.
the thing I was going to say that I didn't anticipate, and I was talking to Aaron about this at home, is how much nostalgia I'm having for my shop. Like that I'm not at home. There's so many years of being in that home shop and so many years of carving it out and making it exactly what I wanted. And now I sort of feel like I walk by and I'm like, don't look at me. Don't make eye contact with the shop.
How far?
I'm leaving it behind.
How far away is the new space from the house?
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's not. You're not getting a cup of coffee and walking out there in the morning. And
No.
You gonna let Aaron park her car in the garage?
If she wants to open the carriage doors. No, she's looking forward to moving some old furniture and things in there and stripping it and refinishing things.
Oh.
And yeah, so we'll
It's a
still
painting-
use it.
It's a refinishing shop now.
We'll still, I mean, she's very crafty. We'll still use the space, but it's, I do feel a little worried about that aspect of it. Like, and maybe it's just because I haven't made the new shop a home yet. I haven't spent a lot of time there. I haven't set it up. I haven't.
You don't
made
have a
it.
coffee maker.
You got
Well,
tunes?
that's it.
You got
I don't have
tunes?
to, all I've done is move some machinery in
Yeah,
so
tunes
far.
and a coffee maker and a place to sit when you're listening to tunes and having coffee,
Yeah.
and then it's home.
Yeah. That's it.
Are you gonna set up a spray booth?
Here's the thing, and this has been, yes, I'm going to do a spray booth. This is my current plan. I'll run it by you. And I hadn't thought of this until the previous guy who was in this shop space, who used it for like brewing beer or something. There's a couple little parts and pieces left behind, like a fastener in a wall over here, or like a shelf cleat or whatever. And up in the ceiling, which is, I don't know, 14 feet or something.
Nice.
He left a little pulley screwed in from something. Like just a little, like a rope pulley with no rope. Just pulled the rope out from whatever it was and left it there. So I looked up at that and I went, oh, I got an idea. And I started going, because I started thinking, I don't want a spray booth set up all the time. I want to be able to wheel it in front of that loading door, the dock door, and turn on a fan blowing out the loading dock door and be able to spray into that like 3-sided enclosure. So like a temporary spray booth. So I was thinking like I'd make a 2x4 wall or some kind of light frame that folds up and then can roll out of the way and just like tuck next to a wall somewhere.
So you're not thinking of investing in like a legit
It's not a
spray booth
dedicated space.
with
You
uber
don't-
ventilation.
You don't have to. It's just it's just
I'm just saying like for the ventilation issues because I assume that you're going to be spraying the most.
waterborne.
Okay.
Only waterborne. Because I used MTech coatings, which is Target coatings.
Justin Fink, sponsored by Target Coatings.
No, it's awesome because you can buy their if anybody hasn't checked out Target coatings, they make waterborne lacquer, shellac, sanding sealer, all sorts of stuff. And you can write on their website, they have the option of Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore, and you tell them the paint code number, they'll tint it for you and then ship it to you.
That's sweet.
And it's like, why wouldn't you use it? So anyway, with the high ceilings, I started thinking, what if I just made some sort of enclosure that I could then just, pull up via a rope, and so that it's up above the door, just hanging there on with a rope to a cleat, and then when I need it, I just lower it down to the floor, spray away, and then lift it back up again. Does that seem feasible?
I think it'd be badass if you go in, you're ready to work, and then you press the button. The walls come down around you.
Yeah.
You spray, and then when you're done, you press the buttons again, and the walls lift
nice.
back
Wait,
up.
this reminds me of a story.
Not bad, Brian.
Jeff, did you hear about this yet? About Colin is our video director for people who don't know. But Jeff, did you hear when he was shooting this video the other day about he was shooting a Master in a Minute video a couple days ago on using liquid flashing around the bottom of a window opening. So if anybody hasn't used that, instead of using flashing tape, you caulk on this black goop and then you spread it out and create a waterproof barrier. So they built a mock-up wall. They framed a 2x4 wall, put a window opening in the center, sheathed it all with sheathing, and so Colin sets up his camera on a tripod right in the center so that he's dead on with that window opening. And then he's setting it up and he turns around and Matt, the guy on set, was going, "Oh, look out, look out." He turns around, the wall fell and it fell right so that the camera tripod poked through the window opening.
Perfectly.
like an old cheesy comedy or something.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway,
I think you should build it just for the sake of Yankee engineering and, it'd be cool.
so I can do that hand over hand rope
Yeah.
thing. I feel like
and-
I'm really getting something done.
Yeah, because you're big into rope these days, right? Like,
Eve. Yeah, I mean, I assume I will make this out of.
yeah, what's the
What do I make it out of, Jeff? Jute? No.
Manila hemp?
no? Come on, what's your
Oakum.
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 Oakum. Back to the oakum.
Yep.
Yep.
I make my own rope, everybody. I don't at all. First question. John writes, I've always been a big fan of truss roof framing. It's fast, relatively inexpensive, and when we built our house, it just seemed like a no-brainer. Well, now we're considering adding some skylights, and suddenly the trusses are showing a potential drawback. How do you frame a new opening in a truss-framed roof without screwing up the structure? It's a good question because you cannot alter trusses once they're installed. They are engineered to work as a system. You know, each of those pieces is joined together into the shape of your roof with those gusset plates, and you can't just cut a piece out because it's either it's either pulling or pushing, and it'll create a weak spot, and the whole thing won't work correctly. I've seen Mike Gurton do this
that's what I was
by framing, basically adding framing, stick framing to the area that you're going to put in the new skylight or dormer or whatever you're doing.
Like sistering rafters to the top quarter of the.
So let's say that your trusses are 24 on center. Let's just make it
Okay.
for ease of discussion. So you would decide where you want your skylight to be, and you would frame it just like you would if there was no trusses there. You know, you'd put up your double rafters on either side of the rough opening, and then the bottom and the top. But the difference is that you'd have to have a ridge for those new rafters to hit against at the top.
right.
So you have to cut away part of the truss that's going to no longer be used, essentially. So if there's a truss in that 24-inch on center area, you got to kind of cut it out of the way.
Interesting.
But you're replacing it with new structural framing that's on both sides of the ridge. That's the key. So it's got to go up on the side that actually has the skylight, and then to a little ridge, and then back down the other side of the roof to the other plate, so that you're essentially creating a little stick frame portion within a truss frame roof.
That's
If
interesting.
that makes sense.
Does that
Does it make sense,
is
Brian?
that Mike Gurton approved or is that engineer approved?
Well, no, you have to check. I mean, I think the way that he worded it when he did this way back when was, you have to consult an engineer, but in the past I've done this, like,
And it has been approved.
or I've solved it by doing this type of thing. So I assume that he had it engineered.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's the thing that I can't wrap my head around, and it may be in this article that Mike did, and maybe I can dig it up, but it's the order of events, because you have to put new framing in and cut old framing sort of at the same time, somewhat. And I wonder how much it really matters. Like,
Yeah.
Mike, in that article, Mike did a splayed skylight well, and there were trusses within the well. The trusses were left in the well, and he painted them white.
this
That-
wasn't an
yeah.
article. This was
This
that's
is
a
something
different way.
different?
Yeah, this
Okay.
was like an old Q&A topic. I
Okay,
think.
so because and he actually made it look pretty nice, and so skylights are sized to fit in between 24-inch on center trusses, so that part's not a problem. You can cut the opening in the roof and you put the skylight in, and then like you said, you'll need probably. I mean, I don't know how much weight bearing a skylight's really doing, but yeah, I guess you need a little bit extra support in your framing for the weight of the skylight. Not necessarily buying that, but I suppose we have to say that you do. And then he created a splayed well in there without modifying any of the trusses, I believe. Create a splayed well.
Check out the hand
that-
gestures.
That came outside of those, I think those two skylights or two trusses that the skylight was set within, and then drywalled that, and then painted the trusses white so that they were within the well. It looked really neat. It looked really clean and nice.
Similar approach to that. You just reminded me. So we have the next issue, this mid-century modern house article, and in one of these houses, they took out. They had a wall separating the kitchen and the dining room, I guess it was, and it just had a little door opening. And instead of putting in a giant header to open up that whole wall, they left the door opening the way it was, but the wall to one side of the door, they removed the drywall.
Oh, yeah.
And
Love this.
replaced it with like a nicely framed wall. It
Yeah.
looked like it was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches on center with studs, and then the horizontal blocking was set at like 3 different levels in a nice
Oh,
pattern.
really?
And then they painted everything white. it was awesome looking.
Really?
Yeah,
And
so it's
I-
like an open stud wall.
Yeah,
with,
gotcha.
with some frames to have a
It was
design
structured,
to it,
and it was structural,
But it was
though.
it was the load bearing wall. So.
Interesting.
I looked at it and I was like, that is such a good idea.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I mean, it
That's
takes
in the next
takes-
issue, right?
Takes guts to pull that trigger. Like, is this going to look good?
Yeah.
Let's go with it and see what happens. Let's get in the photo
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can share that photo. We'll put it on there.
Cool.
You can go
don't
to-
modify it.
Trusses.
unless you
Talk to an adult.
Talk to an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah,
find whoever's
Yeah.
smarter than you and ask them.
yeah, and do what they say.
There's always somebody smarter than you. I'll try and find that Q&A though, and I'll put it up at findhomebuilding.com/podcast, where you can also go watch the video of Brian doing all of his hand gestures to explain that skylight well.
Displayed skylight well.
You guys are both Italian, but only Brian really talks with his hands. How come you don't, Rob?
I don't know. I don't have a good reason.
Yeah.
Brian's just more of an animated fellow than I am.
Maybe he'll yell at us again today. We'll see if we can get him fired up.
That's the other side of the Italian heritage.
Shelley writes, my husband and I want to start the long process of swapping out all the two-prong electrical outlets in our old house for modern we're laughing already.
Keep going.
For modern three-prong versions. The boxes are metal, so is our best bet to just attach that third wire from the outlet right to the box itself? Go ahead, Brian.
I'm not touching it.
You just love that it
I
says
can't touch
third
it.
wire,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that third wire.
The mark of really understanding electricity.
I
Well,
think
okay. So the third wire is the ground, right?
Yes and no. I'd be curious to know what she right, Shelley? Mm-hmm. Shelley is talking about, because if you have a two-prong outlet,
Mm-hmm.
you probably have ungrounded circuits. You probably don't have a ground running through your cable.
Yeah.
You probably just have a hot and a neutral. So I don't know what the third.
Well, it says third
Wire
It says third
is.
wire from the outlet. So I'm guessing this is just third. What do I do with that other terminal on the outlet?
Is there a?
Or maybe there's a
the
pigtail
other
on it,
terminal.
or I don't know.
Okay.
But so, but the question is essentially, whatever the specific conditions are, because this could be a lot of different kinds of wiring.
Yeah.
And a lot of different time periods, different kind of wiring that you have to deal with here. But
So how do you upgrade?
essentially, we're talking about an upgrade to grounded outlets. And that's what that third prong on an outlet is. It's the ground. So there's a lot of ways to skin this cat. I think one of the most popular. Well, so first we should start with the simplest is if you can determine that your outlet box is grounded, you can attach a wire right to the back of the metal electrical box, and that will act as your ground. One way to check that is so then it becomes a discussion of, well, is my box grounded or not? You could. The way I would do this, and maybe electricians would frown on it, so we'll probably get some letters about this, but is wire up one and then put in one of those little three-prong electrical testers, and it will indicate to you whether the ground circuit is complete. You can also use a continuity tester to do this. And the reason why that's not always, you can't just look at the box and say, well, it's got metal jacketed wire coming into it, so obviously it's grounded, because that wire may go into the basement and then switch over to Romex instead of metal wiring, and so that's not gonna be a ground, or it might not be. It could be that the metal jacketed cable has rusted and broken into two pieces, and so that the ground is going to be interrupted. The path to ground is interrupted. So anyway, if you can verify that the box is grounded, it's acceptable to put a little wire that jumps from the back of that to the green terminal on the back of the outlet to the back of the electrical box with a little set screw. It's like a number 10 by 32 screw or something, I think is what they use. If the box isn't grounded, or you don't know, or you are worried about it, you can just put in a GFI outlet. And although it's not technically grounded, it will still protect you as if it was grounded. So, and you can if you can figure out which of those outlets is the first one in a long string of outlets, like if you have a living room that has 6 outlets, find the one that's closest to the incoming power, put a GFI there, and it will, and then you can put standard 3-prong outlets in all of the rest of the outlets on that circuit, and the GFI will protect all of them. But then that becomes the trick of figuring out whether it's the first one in the line or not. And I don't know how to do that other than just look at the wire and see if you can trace it. I'm sure that electricians maybe have tricks, and you can always call one, and maybe they have some fancy doohickeys they can put on there and figure that stuff out.
So if you live in a house in an older house where the circuits aren't grounded, and you're not planning on doing any extensive remodeling, but you would like your electrical system to be as safe as possible, is it smart to upgrade to GFI breakers?
So that's the last option, is you can do that. They're more expensive. And I think that the pain in the ass factor goes through the roof, because those GFI breakers and outlets, as you know, are finicky, and you can trip them a lot. And I would rather walk across the room and reset the button in the dining room than go down to the basement every time it happens. But, you know, that is like the next layer of peace of mind. So yes, you would replace the circuit breaker that's servicing those outlets with a special one that's a GFI breaker. So you're protecting the whole circuit with a GFI. We should also note, though, that a lot of old houses, you're going to see a ground wire, or a lot of people think that you can just run a ground wire and wrap it around a pipe, and that it's grounded because the pipe goes like a cold water pipe will go all the way back to the ground. And you used to be able to do that by code, but you can't anymore. And the reason is that there's way too much likelihood of that pipe being changed somewhere along the line with PVC or PEX or something else that will ruin the fact that it's supposed to be a ground. So be careful of that. And I also wondered, this is the part that I can't. Maybe somebody can tell me the answer to this, because you know how there's worry about galvanic corrosion when you join dissimilar metals. Like there's like that galvanic scale, and every kind of metal is on this scale. And the farther apart on this is like a middle point in the scale. The farther apart two listed metals are on the scale, the safer they are to be joined together. As they get closer to the center, it's more risky to have those two metals in contact with each other, because they create what is it, like a dielectric? Jeff, what is it called, Jeff? It's I don't know. It's some sort of a dielectric thing. They interact with each other and they corrode. One of the two will corrode, and so this is important for copper and steel. I think is the combination that everybody worries about. So that's why I see a lot of bronze fittings, because the bronze is kind of the Switzerland you can put in there to act as the buffer. So I'm curious why it is that you can have a metal electrical box and then attach a copper wire to it. And I think the answer is just that there's virtually no chance of moisture, and that usually you have to have some kind of a moisture to kind of kick the electrolysis into gear. But I'm curious for people who know more about that stuff and who can explain it to, let's just pretend that I'm like a kindergartner when it comes to this stuff, and maybe you can send me an email and tell me how it works. Because I know it's a concern with plumbing, and I'm just curious if it's at all a concern, or it's a calculated risk with electrical and that kind of thing. All right, that was nerdy.
It's the galvanic corrosion chart. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Are you setting it up right now?
Yeah. Checking out my magnesium and alloys.
Question 3. Peter writes, "Gentlemen, my question is simple, but I bet opinions will vary. What tools and methods have you found most successful for breaking up and removing concrete?" Ooh. Do you guys do the old maul and haul method?
The maul and haul.
I guess it depends what we're talking about here, but
the first thing you do...
Should we just say like a patio or something so we can be talking about the same thing?
Sure, some kind of slab.
Okay.
Or, like a slab. Oh, never mind. You didn't put a footing in.
Yeah, but like a slab. Let's do like a slab.
Slab.
Slab?
Slab.
Yeah. Okay.
The first thing, if you're really just breaking it up without concern for, you're not trying to cut a hole in it, you're trying to get rid of
it. Trying to demo it, yeah.
The first thing you do is just go out with a big sledgehammer and give it a couple of whacks, because sometimes it's actually quite easy. I've broken up concrete slabs before that just a few swings with a sledgehammer and it just starts to crumble into nice sizable chunks you can take out. And if that works,
so this is like
simple.
Uncontrolled demolition, like the whole slab's coming out.
Right.
Not,
you don't need to be
I want to put a
Right.
a drain in a footing drain in my
Is there an echo in here?
Yeah.
basement.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I would. My first
Yes.
suggestion is just try that because it could be that simple.
Yes. Sometimes it really is.
Yeah.
It's going to be harder the thicker the concrete gets. If you have rebar, it's not going to be that friendly to do it that way
Well, and
because
the
it'll
rebar-
break, but the rebar will hold it
We'll
together.
hold it together, and then so even if it's sometimes you have to end, no matter how you break the concrete, sometimes you end up having to cut the rebar if you want
Yes.
the chunks to be manageable to take them out.
Yes, and then you can use a metal cutting blade on a recip saw, like a nice long one. You
Yeah.
can sneak it right through those cracks and cut that rebar.
Yeah. Or if the pieces broke up enough and sometimes they crumble off of it, you get an angle grinder in there.
Yeah.
You can also use. I've used an angle grinder, score concrete, and then busted it up with a sledgehammer.
So you have like you kind of can control the breaking points,
Yeah.
like you're kind of encouraging it to break along your lines.
Yes,
That's a good
and
idea.
I've also been on a couple of jobs where we just had to go out and rent a full on jackhammer, like
Yeah.
full on big as we can get jackhammer, and just work
and
it that way.
It doesn't make any sense to go small in that department.
No, once
like,
you're doing
just-
it, just
yeah.
get it, and they're easy to use. You get to stand upright as opposed to trying to use like
Yep.
a chisel head on like a hammer drill or
Right.
a rotary hammer.
And think in small pieces because
Yeah.
like a 12 by 12 chunk of concrete 6 inches thick sucks.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I guess depends on like there's a lot of factors that go into the strength of concrete, but sometimes it's just really rebar or not. Sometimes it's just really hard to get to break
Yes.
into pieces.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember we took out a number of concrete patios. I was doing landscape work to replace with stone patios and whatnot. I just remember the range being like, "Oh, this is so easy. We're done by lunchtime." To like some poor sucker being on that jackhammer all day long.
It's like removing tile. You
don't know.
You have no idea until you pop that first one.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh my God. I've had tile jobs where I took out a tile and then on one side of this bathroom, I put the like a stiff putty knife down and I just walked down and they were just like parting. The tiles were just lifting and parting on the knife.
Are they bedded in thin set or?
Yeah, it was just they were shot. Like they
Oh, really?
had been, the floor had been bouncing and they just popped right like
It's a good day.
yeah, it was like, oh god,
Good
this is so
demo day.
good. And other
Yeah.
ones, you might spend 3 hours on a single tile. Just like I wish I was not a remodeler.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've wanted to try with concrete, and I never have kind of pulled the trigger on it, is those systems the liquid stuff that you pour into the holes, like
and they expand. And
yeah, like Dexpan is a company the one that I know of.
They did that on a larger scale on our California project, our demonstration home. They had some ledge or big boulders.
Oh, different
and
rocks,
and
yeah.
So they did it. Yeah, they drilled some big holes and put that liquid in there and
How'd that work?
it worked.
It's got
worked,
something
huh?
like 17 to 18,000 pounds of pressure per square inch or something.
Wow.
And it's so, I guess the selling point for this stuff is as I read up on the website this morning, it's like take a slab and you drill holes like on a foot grid. So like every 12 inches in every direction, and you drill 80 to 90% through the slab. So you don't want to go all the way through because then you pour the liquid in and it's just going to soak through. Then you mix up this stuff with a little bit of water to kind of like a goopy pourable paste. And then you just pour it into the holes, and 24 hours later, everything's cracked. Like it's as simple as that. The one thing that was really, I'm glad I read the website, is that you have to, like, let's say you have like this patio slab, and one side's against your foundation, the other side's against dirt. You got to dig out dirt on that open side, otherwise it's going to push in both directions, and it will push your foundation.
Oh, you got to
Like
give
you
it
gotta
somewhere to move.
Give it somewhere to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But super cool. And I don't know, it was like $40 for a bucket of it or
You
something.
were talking about, it's called Dexpan?
Dexpan, yeah.
Dexpan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
So what if
I
it
kind
is?
of want to just like break something
Yeah,
with it. Just
go-
put a time lapse camera on it,
Yeah. What if it is more controlled? What are the best methods for breaking up concrete if you are breaking a slab to put a footing underneath it? For
A
example,
wet saw for me is the way to go. You cut through is, the bigger the diameter of the blade, the deeper you're going to go in a cut. And
But to remove the waste, it's kind of all the other methods
Right.
that you just described. It's
right, you
just-
still have to chip out the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you cut all the way through the slab, it's not like you're going to stick your fingers down there and lift
And
the
pull
slab
it out.
straight
That thing
out.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you got to cut outside first and then bust it up.
Yeah. Yep. And sometimes, you can even with a saw that doesn't have a really deep blade, like you can use a circular saw with a
masonry blade on it.
with a masonry blade, and then just kind of have water on the slab. Or like I've seen masons take just a water bottle and take a nail and poke a hole in the cap, and then just stand there and squeeze it into the path of the blade with a GFI, a grounded plug on the saw, please. So that's one way to do it. And anyway, I was saying you can use a smaller diameter blade because once you kind of make that nice clean cut, it doesn't really matter about the layer below that. Like if the slab's 4 inches and you can only cut an inch deep and have it look nice and clean, you can chip out the remaining 3 inches and you're never going to see it because when you re-pour the footing, it's going to look all nice, smooth, and clean and cut at the top. So,
Gotcha.
So that's one other way to go. But my best advice is if you're going to go rent something, and people should rent stuff more often. I feel like I see so many people who work their asses off to do things the hard way
with the wrong tools that they have.
Well, it's just like go rent a drywall lift for $40. What are you doing?
Gotcha.
Like, this is the greatest tool that anyone ever invented. Why are you lifting this with your head? You know, and same with demo hammers like that. It's like they have huge ones, and they're right at the rental center, and you'd be surprised how cheap they are if you had all value your time or body. Plus, I mean, who doesn't want to run a jackhammer?
Oh, you could get that excavator with the jackhammer attachment on it.
There you go.
Yeah.
That I take back my answer. That's the way to do it. Rent the excavator, the biggest one you can get with that jackhammer attachment.
Well, you can just grab it with the backside of a bucket and just like lift the slab. And once you get a little negative space underneath there, lift it free from the concrete from the dirt or the gravel. If you hit it with the sledgehammer, it just shatters. It's the reason why it's so hard to break up is because it's on that solid surface. If you create a little space under there, I've even under walkways, I've taken a garden hose and just
created some hollows.
Yeah, try to create some hollows under there so you whack it breaks. Yeah, that's worked a little bit. That was kind of a trick I accidentally landed on by watching an electrician, Cliff Popejoy, use this garden hose tool to burrow under a concrete walkway to run a wire for landscape lighting.
Yeah.
He just kind of used a jet setting and burrowed through and then ran his conduit. Yeah. It's cool. As long as you pack it back in there good. I think we got time for one more, right? Yeah. All right, Carl writes, my wife and I are planning a pair of built-in bookcases with a bench seat between them for our living room. I'm planning to hire a carpenter to do the work, but before I start asking for quotes and designs, I wanted to get your advice for what you think is the best way to deal with a pair of outlets and a heat and air conditioning register in the floor, all of which will be blocked by the new installation. Armed with your advice, I can get a better sense of which contractor seems most prepared for the job. Thanks in advance. So I think we've all run into this.
Yeah, the tough thing. I mean, we can offer a bunch of options, but the tough thing is depending on the design, those options will be design dependent.
It might influence your design.
You may have to do very little based if those things can stay in their locations and just take a little bit of modification. You might have to do very little. You know, if your design can work with that, you can have some outlets in the back of your bookcases.
Yeah, like open back bookcases.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can have, couldn't you even extend them if you for some reason wanted to have a back on it?
Yeah.
Just extend them through the wood back.
I mean, you might want to check with your inspector, but I think 99% of them would be fine with that.
Right. And you could have a register underneath your window seat if your design allowed for that. So depending on the design, you may or may not have to do that much. I mean, if you really want those things not in that location, much more challenging because you can't just cover those outlets and leave them there. And moving a register could be significant work.
So we should clarify that for people. You are not allowed to have electrical connections that are buried in a wall that are not accessible. So even if you remove the outlet and put a blank cover plate on and you have wire nuts and everything on the end of those exposed wires, you still can't do that.
Well, you need access to the plate.
You need to be able to get to the plate, yes.
So you can't put your solid back bookcases over that cover.
I think we've all done it.
I have never done such a thing, Justin. How dare you?
Yeah. Because it's easy and it's an attractive option when you don't want to do it the right way because the right way is hard. But you shouldn't do it because it really it would cause a big problem. And if you needed to get to that box and you can't, you're going to be really pissed that you didn't take the time to figure out what to do. I've seen some cabinet guys. This goes back to like where in the run is the outlet that you're worried about. If it's the end of the run, you can just decommission those last two outlets, maybe. Like, in other words, go back to the last exposed box,
together.
Yeah, and then cut the wire there.
Yeah.
So that now those outlets behind the cabinet are just dead.
How do built-ins affect the electrical code for outlet spacing? And like, because you have to have an outlet every so many feet in like a living room.
I don't understand that outlet spacing thing because I see
it could be excessive.
I see houses. Yeah, it can be excessive. Like and then other times I've seen houses where you're like, shouldn't there be more outlets here? Like this is a brand new house. How is this okay?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's supposed to be every 12 feet. Is that what it is? So that a 6-foot cord could reach it from anywhere. I think that's what something code like that. But you could also. I don't think if it, let's say it was like a like hidden storage, like a lift lid or something on like a bench seat. I don't think you can have an outlet in there.
Right.
I don't think that's allowed.
Like when people put them in bathroom drawers and stuff. That's not actually.
Yeah, you really can't do that.
That's not actually allowed.
Like you can't have an outlet in a closed cabinet, essentially. Is that what you're saying?
I think technically you can't. Maybe somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong.
Okay.
I don't know about the drawer is a good point. I've not faced that example, but I have seen it in a window seat bench, and I believe that when I talked to the electrician, they said you couldn't do it, and then I did it.
Can you move those outlets into the baseboard of those built-ins?
Yes, I think you could do that. You would have to have, I guess in that case, you'd have to have. Well, if you could ensure that the wire was not going to be nicked by any fasteners, I wonder if you could just run Romex right in the kick space underneath the cabinet, right to the front, or if you'd have to put it in some kind of conduit or armored BX cable or something like that. The same, by the way, goes for the heat register. If you have an open bottom design, like little bracket feet, you can just have that heat come up right underneath the window seat or bookcase or whatever. And in that case, I would probably take some care to maybe add like a little layer of rigid foam insulation on the underside of that bookshelf or cabinet base so that as the hot air comes up, it's not like super drying and shrinking and cracking all of the wood in your cabinetry. It's sort of providing just a little bit of a buffer so that hot air mostly goes out. You can also extend that ductwork.
Yeah,
I've done that too.
And treat it as like a toe kick register.
Yes, extend it out to the toe kick. Yeah.
Yeah. And you could put a slick little integrated kind of grill on there into your face frame or something, so it doesn't have to be that metal applied register.
Definitely done that too. You could move it in the basement if you had, or whatever, if you've had access. You could put a floor register just in front of the unit. Just chances are you can shorten it.
Yeah.
If this is a first floor with access underneath, it's moving and getting rid of these things are a lot easier than if it's not accessible from underneath.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The outlets, you could just
I didn't even think
get rid of them.
With the outlet is flipping it to the other side of the wall. That's a good way to fix it too. If you have an outlet in your dining room and you're about to put a bookcase there, you can open up the wall where it will be covered, do some surgery to flip that outlet to the opposite facing wall.
Interesting.
Without having to change the wiring. And even if it's an outside wall, you could do it because now you just have an exterior outlet.
Two.
Well, that's right. There's two in this case. Yeah.
That's all right.
Interesting approach.
Yeah. Might be having a party. Might need them.
Yeah.
Never know, Brian.
You never know.
Oh, Lord.
Well, all right.
All right, that's going to wrap us up for this week. If you have questions on topics you'd like to hear us discuss, you know where to find us. FHBpodcast@taunton.com.
Hold on. No doubt there was some misinformation on the electrical stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So, write in.
Yeah, I mean, we're nobody can be an expert on everything.
Especially electrical.
Especially electrical. I think we should get some sort of a badge of courage for being willing to talk about electrical issues on this show. And we are open to your flogging. We will read responses from actual Sparkies on a follow-up show.
Nice.
I'm hoping to hear from the guy with the garage moisture problem from last week's show.
See if it dried out in there yet?
Well,
the drywall
because
thing.
I was thinking about that after the show, and I think you guys are wrong.
Oh.
And I want to find out
nice.
if
Well, let's revisit
I
it.
want to find out.
What do you think the problem is, Brian?
I don't know what the problem is, but the only reason I think you're wrong is because
This is the Italian side coming.
is
Get ready for
because
it.
when you're talking with your example of Mike Gerton working in a very tight house where a lot of drywall is getting installed, I find that to be a tough correlation to a garage with garage doors, for one thing, and not tight at all, with no insulation, and drywall mud dries really fast. I find it hard to believe that caused a moisture issue in the garage. Maybe I'm wrong.
We're saying the brand
I
new
just find it
slab
hard to
and the
believe.
drywall.
Yeah, it might have been a new
Yes,
slab too.
all combined.
Still, in a garage, I find it
Brian
hard to
skeptical.
believe.
The sauna was running a lot
just-
in there to the hot tub.
I'd
Well,
like,
let's just hear from him. Maybe
I'd like to double down on our solution.
Yeah, I also would. I still think that I'm right.
Yeah, let that be noted.
And
the show
if,
notes page.
And if I get an email that says that I'm not right, we will never hear about it.
Right.
I also want to challenge everyone on the show's ability to answer a question, mention Mike Gerton's name, and not be taken to task for their answer,
Yeah.
because that shouldn't be allowed.
Oh man.
All right. Next week, everybody. So leave us some reviews, send us some questions. We'll see y'all next week. Until then, keep craft alive and happy building.